Council meeting of, can I? I'd like to call the Anacortes City Council meeting of November 4th, 2024 to order. Mr. Franciac, will you take the roll, please?
Mr. Fantini.
Still here.
Mr. Young.
Here.
Mr. Walters.
Here.
Ms. Cleland McGrath.
Here.
Ms. Moulton.
Here.
Mr. McDougall.
Here.
Ms. Hubick.
Here.
Thank you.
Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? All right, we're on to announcements and committee reports. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for their participation in our special meeting with the Port Commissioners. Appreciate the thoughtful discussion. A lot more work to do there. My next announcement is it is election eve, so I have a little statement that I'd like to read. So tomorrow is election day, and I've said many times before each election day that voting is a civic duty I hold dear as a citizen, a career military officer, and as your nonpartisan mayor. Casting a vote is how we contribute to our republic, and in Washington it couldn't be easier. You have until 8 p.m. tomorrow to get your ballots in. Anacortes has 2 convenient drop boxes, one on the north side of the library and another on Skyline Way. I understand that elections, especially partisan ones, can stir up a lot of emotion and tension, but I've found that my own happiness isn't rooted in who's in office, even when it's me. Instead, I build my happiness through connections with family, friends, and community. Let's remember that thousands of our neighbors will vote for candidates they believe in. Thousands will vote differently. After tomorrow, regardless of the outcomes, we are all still part of this incredible Anacortes community. If your preferred candidate wins, feel free to celebrate. If they don't, that's okay to feel disappointed. Express yourself respectfully, as our First Amendment allows, but also let's remember that damaging property or causing harm isn't acceptable and will be dealt with accordingly. Once Election Day is behind us, we will keep doing what we always do, working, caring for our families, paying our taxes, and appreciating the unique community we share here in Anacortes. Thank you for participating in the democratic process. Okay, Veterans Day weekend, there's a number of events coming up, including city office will be closed Monday, November the 11th, and the council meeting will be on Tuesday, November 12th, as we normally do when there's a Monday holiday. Solid waste pickup will be on Tuesday, the 12th as well, for those whose pickup is Monday. There'll be a parade on Sunday, November 10th at 1 p.m. Apparently it's the first one in a long time, Veterans Day parade in Anacortes, because the port's not doing their event in the transit shed. And there'll be a static viewing event at Causland Park following the parade. Island Hospital will be hosting a short ceremony Monday, November 11th at 1 p.m. And then the last announcement I have is the Community Economic Development Survey is still up and online. The city is looking for your feedback on the economic development opportunities and barriers to our city. Encourage the public to share their input to inform the new economic development strategic plan and comprehensive plan process. The survey is available online at City of Anacortes website, and there'll be a follow-up meeting to look at those surveys on November 19th at noon. Again, the public is invited to come and provide their feedback for that economic development plan. All right, that's all my announcements, and I know on the agenda it shows a Public Works Committee, but I appreciate the committee adjusting their schedule and meeting with the port. Any other council or committee reports that I may have missed?
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Fantini.
On Saturday night, I attended Anacortes Community Theater's gala. It was celebrating their 60th year of serving the community in Anacortes. That has been, it's a very rare feat for a community theater to be around that long and keep going. Hopefully they'll continue for another 60. I also want to take a moment to thank you for the proclamation that you signed celebrating them and the work that they've done over the past 60 years. And that the event was great, and here's to hopefully 60 more years.
All right, thank you. All right, any other reports I may have missed? Okay, we'll go on to item 4, which is public comment. Any member of the public wish to address the council on anything that is not on our agenda tonight? Yeah, come on up. Yeah, you come to the mic, sorry. Come to the microphone, and It's okay. We'll help you through it, and make sure the green light is on, and state your name and the city you live in. Once you get the green light at the base of the microphone. There's no light, push the circle. Green
Okay.
light? Yeah.
Hear me now?
Yeah, and state your name and the city.
My name is Jeff Anderson, Anacortes, Washington, West 8th Place. I just approached Councilman Fantini about a problem we have in our neighborhood. We have a public parking area on West 8th Place, which was put there by the city. It's 3 parking stalls. And basically, I think it was created for people that go to Cranberry Lake. My wife and I purchased our home in July of 19. In January of 20, a gentleman and his wife bought a house across the street from the public parking area. They have continually parked their private vehicles there all the time. They've approached people that go to the lake and asked them why they're parking there. Our son, for one, came to visit us, parked his rig there. The guy came out from across the street and said, "Why are you parking here? Where are you going?" He has continually harassed people in the neighborhood and people that park there. We have been tagged by the city of Anacortes Police Department twice, my neighbor and I, for parking there more than 3 days. I addressed this with, unfortunately, Mr. Fantini last year and never got a response back. This neighbor is abusing the public parking area with his own personal vehicles for days and days and days. I have talked to Officer Harris of the Anacortes Police Department. He's aware of it, and he says, well, it's public. He moves his cars periodically. We had a guest at our home this weekend, parked her car there for 2 days. She came out today to get her car, and there is a hammer hit in the roof of her car, and she feels the neighbor did that. He has a security camera faced at the public parking area. Again, he's abused this. How do we stop it? It's a public parking area, and anyone, and Officer Harris is aware of this. It needs to stop.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Okay, anybody else want to address the council? All right, we will move on to item 5, which is our consent agenda, items A and B. Council.
Miller,
Mr. Young.
I move we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Motion by Mr. Young, a second by Ms. Hubick to approve the consent agenda. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. On to item 6, which is other business. First piece of business is item 6A. This is ordinance 4091, Access Anacortes Fiber Internet Limited Tax General Obligation Bond Issue. This is a discussion item only. And Mr. Hoagland, oh wait, you've got this one, right? Yes. Yes. Okay. Sorry, I didn't give you enough time.
Sorry, Mayor, I was not quite on the ball there. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council, and members of the audience. So tonight we are presenting our first read of the ordinance 4091, which is a bond ordinance that would authorize the issuance of $13.5 million in bonds for the purpose of raising funds to continue the Anacortes fiber broadband build out. So what we've talked about and what the plan is for $12 million in bond issue, but we put a larger amount in there as authorized in case something comes up in the course of our due diligence that requires us to increase that amount a little bit. So the plan is 12 million plus issuance costs. We do leave a little bit of buffer there just in case so that we can continue the process without having to come back to council and start the process over. I did want to pop up real quick. Just briefly, I'll put a copy of the bond issue up. Again, that's bond ordinance number 4091. Also wanted to show the schedule of events that we have in place for this bond issue. So you can see that we have checked off a number of these items already. We're down here at November 1st, November 4th, first reading of the bond ordinance. So we'll come back next Tuesday. Monday's holiday. We'll come back Tuesday for the regular council meeting for the second read, and then authorization of the bond ordinance. The following week, on the 13th, we have a rating call with Standard & Poor's to get a rating for in preparation of going into the market, and then still on track to go into the bond market early December. We do have our bond attorney and underwriter on the line, Alice Ostiak and Justin Monway, if you have any questions, but would be happy to entertain any of those questions that you may have now.
All right, council.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Fantini.
So as we go out for this bond, obviously it's going to put us in a little more debt. And I'm just curious, I know we have a legal limit that we can go to overall as a city of the amount of debt that we can be in. Can you just maybe tell me what that limit is and about where we're at with it?
Yeah, so I don't have that at hand. I'm happy to bring that back next week. In fact, we have that
Perfect.
material that we're putting together for Standard & Poor's. That's part of that. The debt limitation is based on the city's, I believe it's on the taxable value of the city's assessed size. And the city currently doesn't have any debt in place. That limitation does not apply to the revenue debt that we have for the water and sewer utilities, and we currently don't have any general obligation debt at this point. So this would be the first general obligation debt that the city would have in place once this is issued.
Great, thank you.
Steve?
Mayor Miller. Oh, yeah. Mr. McDougall, and then, Mr. Monway, did you want to answer that? Do you have more to answer on that?
Yeah, I think Alice
Yeah.
was ready to
Oh.
potentially answer
Yeah,
that too.
just on the debt capacity question. So the calculation for non-voted general obligation debt is 1.5% of the city's assessed value. And so it's, I mean, I don't have that number in front of me. We can run that calculation for
Oh,
sure.
I have it. It's 93,856,880. So plenty of debt capacity.
There you go. Mr. McDougall.
Thank you. Mr. Hoagland, I remember like maybe a few years back, we spoke about a revenue bond. And is this particular one a revenue bond, or is this just like general? Like I forget if there was a specific requirement for a revenue bond. Either way, this one is certainly paid for by revenues from the fiber optic network anyway.
Yeah, so there are a few requirements that generally accepted accounting principles GAAP requires in order for debt to be considered revenue debt. This is general obligation debt. It will be fixed with the city's taxing authority and not based on the revenue capacity of the city's fiber department. So yeah, at this point of the fiber department, this is kind of the prudent path to take to secure what the city's general tax obligation.
Yeah, I think just if I may build on that. So for a fiber optic network, the city's statutory authority to operate that network is derived from its sort of general governmental powers and the fact that this is an extension of a general governmental fiber optic network and an ancillary use. And so that's kind of a long way of saying that there are not state statutes in place to permit a city to issue purely revenue-backed debt for this type of operation. And I think the second piece piece is maybe one that Justin might want to comment on, but the fact that anytime you do have a new utility that is still in build out phase, you know, even if we were in a place where we had that statutory authority to do the standalone revenue obligation, we wouldn't have the history of collecting revenues and have a rate revenue sort of you know, track record to go to Standard and Poor's with. And so I think that, you know, that would be another reason why it's, you know, a general obligation credit is going to be the pathway that you're going to head.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Mr. Walters.
Would you bring to us when you return next week a spreadsheet showing the amount of the bond, the amount of the debt that we need to repay to ourselves for the interfund loan, the amount of the expense anticipated for 2025 for fiber, you know, all the components that go into the amount of the bond that you're asking us to approve? I feel like that's
Sure.
important for the
Yeah.
public process, but also, you know, for us to feel confident.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So,
And,
yeah.
and just, you know, for the record, following that on the spreadsheet, it would also include, you know, the expected cost of servicing the debt. I mean, we don't know that for sure yet because we don't know the interest rate, but we should be able to guesstimate that. And then the amount of revenue that we'll be bringing in for fiber versus the expenses that fiber still has to incur to complete the build out, those kinds of things. That's all of that backup is what I would like to be able to show the public to demonstrate that we know what we're doing here when we're going out for this bond.
Absolutely.
Staff's got all that, I know, and we'll be able to put it together for council and the public. All right, anything else?
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Fantini?
Just a quick, one of the things that makes me feel pretty comfortable with this, and I know this is only the first read, but if I remember from our retreat, our revenue projections for our fiber are ahead of where we anticipated that they would be. So we're doing markedly better than we thought we were going to do when we conceptualized this whole project. Is that still accurate?
Yeah, the take rate has far exceeded what the expectations have been, and frankly, what the model was based on when the fiber department was established now 5-6 years ago. And that is the case. So those revenues have been exceeding those expectations based on that increased take rate. And one thing kind of related, I guess we'll bring back for that material that Mr. Walters was just talking about, but like we talked about at the retreat, we're planning on doing a 30-year bond. It does still have a 10-year refunding window. So at that point, the expectation is we would not refund for another 20 years to fill out the full 30-year term, but likely be looking at a 10-year refunding if not something more significant. Ideally, we'd be able to pay the entire balance off at that point, but that's the initial plan: 30-year bond with a 10-year refunding.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Walters?
I think it's maybe even understating it to say that revenues have been ahead of schedule. The take rate has been substantially ahead of where we modeled it so many years ago because people just love the service and its quality and it's dependable and it's compares favorably to everybody else. But also expenses have been higher. So that's why I think this is the perfect opportunity to box all that up and show it to council and also to the public about what it is, how we've gotten here and where we're going and how we are buttoning this up now. We're getting very close to having full build out of the city, and then we will slow down on some of the expense side and bring in the revenue to pay off this bond. So I think it's really a great opportunity to demonstrate all of that in one spot. We've been delaying this because we were uncertain about the magnitude of the expenses, but now we're close to the end. We have a good sense of it, so it's a great opportunity to do that.
All right, thank you for that. And this one, I do have this asterisk. Any member of the public wish to talk to the council on this one? Okay. All right, on to item 6B. This is Resolution 3169, authorizing procurement from or through the United States government. This is a discussion item with possible action, and Mr. Hoagland, I think you're pinch hitting for Ms. Swetnam.
Indeed, thank you, Mayor. Members of the council, members of the audience. So we have Resolution 3169 before you tonight. So what this does is identifies pursuant to State Law 39.32.090, this resolution authorizes the city to participate in federal government purchasing through the General Services Administration Department, and essentially by adopting, exercising the state RCW, and the resolution through that means allows the waiving of certain bid requirements for items that are on federal contracts. And I think, if I understand correctly, kind of the impetus of this particular resolution at this time is the fireboat that council has authorized the grant for. So it waives certain bidding requirements, but other contracting requirements still stay in place, such as contracts exceeding the mayor's bid authority still need to come to council, things of that nature. So it's effectively allowing the city to participate in those federal contracts, and some of those federal contracts, then it's like when we purchase things off state contract, the bidding requirement has already been met. It's the same concept, except at the federal level. I did include, if you can bear with me a minute, I did include the RCW. It's pretty short if you would like to read that. But I'm happy to try and answer any questions that council may have about this.
All right, council. Questions?
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Fantini?
Hey, so thank you for the clarification on the fireboat, because when I read this, I was like, well, what are we purchasing? Because it seems like we're voting to do this, but we don't, like, there's nothing in here that talks about what types of goods or services we're looking to, anything specific. So is this specific to the fireboat, or is it like, I guess I'm just unclear on how this factors into the whole bid process.
Yeah, so it's not specific to the fireboat. The fireboat is kind of what provided the motivation to get this done at this point, but it provides access to a number of schedules that have items identified on federal contract lists that we can now participate in. So again, kind of similar in my, pardon me, my way of thinking, it's similar to the state contract where the state has actually gone out and done this bidding for us, and they have these items identified on the state contract. We can go make a purchase of those, and then through that venue have met the bidding requirements that the state law has in place. So likewise, this accounts for those bidding requirements that are in place for those items, and by virtue of the state law has identified that those state bid requirements would be met as well.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Young?
Mr. Hoagland, in a nutshell, this is really about saving money and taking on opportunities that may pose itself and sort of positions our city to be able to take advantage of that to our benefit.
Yeah, absolutely, and as well as efficiencies in that purchasing process as well. You bet.
All right.
Yeah, so without council authorization, staff's not even going to attempt to do any U.S. government bidding.
Correct.
Mr. Walters?
Where I have purchased off the GSA contract before, in terms of vehicles, the discount was in some cases really significant because they are doing national procurement and getting a contract price for a very large number of vehicles. I imagine, though, that we will not actually be authorized to use this for very much. Is it only the fireboat, or will there be other things that we will be authorized to use? And have you identified those?
Yeah, so my understanding at this point, it's just the fireboat. The only thing that we kind of have on the horizon at this point that would qualify through this process is the fireboat. but it doesn't expire, so we'll have this in place then for future, potential future purchases.
Okay. All right. Well, I think it's very straightforward and analogous to the other things that we have done. So I move that we authorize signature on Resolution 3169 for GSA purchases.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Walters and a second by Mr. Fantini to approve Resolution 3169. Any additional discussion? Mr. Franciac, vote please.
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Walters.
Yes.
Ms. Cleland McGrath,
Yes.
Ms. Moulton,
Yes.
Mr. McDougall,
Yes.
Ms. Hubick,
Yes.
Mr. Fantini.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, next up is item 6C. This is contract award, wastewater treatment plant, high efficiency diffuser system, equipment purchase. It's a discussion item, possible action. Mr. Rayum is here, ready to go.
Good evening, council. I'm just going to talk about the two items together because
Okay.
they're basically the same thing, if that's okay. So in April of this year, you might have seen this before, you might recognize this specific piece of equipment. We let a contract with this contractor to install the diffusers and purchase the diffusers. They might not have read the contract too closely, but anyhow, they didn't agree to the terms of the contract, so that's why we had to go through some negotiation of the contract to get back to you tonight with both the contract for the equipment as well as the installation costs. So it wasn't really on our side that we needed to bring it back a second time, but here we are, and they do agree with the contracts as presented.
Okay, question. So the other contract is a aeration diffuser replacement.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton.
Thank you. So I looked at the prior contract, and it was for the exact same price, so the change is the labor contract.
Correct.
That's it, okay. Thank you.
Somebody else? Other questions?
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton.
I move that we authorize you to sign the updated contract with Ovivo USA in the amount of $270,933.76 for the purchase of a high-efficiency diffuser system.
Second.
All right, a motion by Ms. Moulton, simultaneous second. I'll go with Mr. Young to approve the contract as presented. Any additional discussion? Mr. Franciac, vote please, and then we'll take up the second contract.
Mr. Walters.
Yes.
Ms. Cleland McGrath,
Yes.
Ms. Moulton,
Yes.
Mr. McDougall,
Yes.
Ms. Hubick,
Yes.
Mr. Fantini,
Yes.
Mr. Young.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, I'll go ahead and read the next one, 6D, contract award, wastewater treatment plant, aeration diffuser replacement installation. Mr. Rayum.
Sorry, it was the same discussion as presentation I
Yeah,
just provided.
right, okay.
It's
But
for
we
the
have to
installation
take
costs.
separate action, obviously, on them
Correct,
both.
yeah. Sorry, I thought you wanted me to present again.
Yeah, I
Mayor
just
Miller,
making sure. Ms. Hubick.
thank you. I would move that City Council authorize the mayor to sign contract 24-110-SEW-002 with McLaurin Sons in the amount of $187,384.06 to perform the wastewater treatment plant aeration diffuser replacement installation.
Second.
Okay, a motion by Ms. Hubick, a second by Mr. McDougall to authorize the contract as presented. Any additional discussion? Mr. Franciac.
Ms. Cleland McGrath,
Yes.
Ms. Moulton,
Yes.
Mr. McDougall,
Yes.
Ms. Hubick,
Yes.
Mr. Fantini,
Yes.
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Walters.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, thank you. I just want to make sure I get that right without the city attorney here. Okay, next up is 6E. This is the 2025 operating budget, and this is a discussion item. And Mr. Hoagland, you're on and ready to go.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So tonight we continue with our budget discussion. This is the Public Works Department's. Forgot to get the clicker tonight, so we'll be going through by hand, but the same process as last week. And I did want to point out, if you have the electronic copy, You can see how the pointer turns into a little hand. You can click on any of those departments and it'll take you directly to, so for example, you click on engineering, take you right to the engineering page. If you go back and hit this content button up in the right-hand corner, it'll take you back to the overview page. And I did want to point out, same as last week, this is in alphabetical order by department. So the administration department, the engineering department, those departments are a little bit different because a portion of those departments are in a number of funds. The administration, each of the utilities has an admin department. The engineering department is within the road department, as well as some of the utilities. So it'll be easy to see once we get into those departments. It'll look normal, but just keep that in mind, and we'll explain as we go.
All right, here we go. Mayor and Council, this is the entirety of the Public Works Department. I like how I said each of these is a department. That's probably why my hair is getting grayer as the year has gone by, is that I think about these things probably almost every day. So it's a very wide and kind of vast department that have lots of different pieces. So we're going to go through all those today with you tonight. So I'm going to start with the administration. I'm going to scroll. I hope that's not too annoying. There we go. Oh, sorry. We're going to do the big picture stuff real quick. So a couple of things. I've been here a year, and so there's a few kind of key things for this year that I'm targeting. That one of them is a little bit different than you've been used to. Is that I've been telling staff we're all in on Commercial Avenue. So the goal is to have the intersection of 12th and Commercial, which is actually the intersections of 11th through 13th and Commercial, built as soon as possible. We have a timeline ticking from the TIB, Transportation Improvement Board, and they are not playing. So we need to go ahead and get that done as soon as we can. The second piece of it is going ahead and continuing our effort from 13th through 34th. In Commercial, and what that will do is pave that road that's been needed to be paved since the 90s, according to WashDOT. To do that, you have to fix all the ADA ramps. Come to find out, we have 125 barriers to disabled people along that road, which is just amazing. That's really going to help us get to our goal of having all barriers to disabled people taken care of in the city. It'll take a big chunk out of it. Not to mention the people that are in the census blocks that surround Commercial Avenue. There's a high percentage that don't have a car, they're financially struggling, and they're disabled. So it'll be a huge improvement to the city. So anyhow, so you'll see through this thing that we're kind of really drawing all the resources we can into it. Even as a city our size, we can't afford to do the project by ourselves. So I've got $2.25 million of grants in the ether right now, hoping to hear back. One of them is a bike ped grant from Washington Department of Transportation. The other one is called the Sandy Williams grant, and that's to help disparaged communities, which the tracks, that's why I know all about the census tracks around this area. It's definitely a kind of a disparaged part of our community. So if we don't get both of those, we're going to have to pivot, and I will come to you as a council and let you know that we're going to kind of revert back to our 1.8 million in paving everywhere else and looking for ADA ramps to replace, not on the state route. We'll have to kind of revert back if we don't get those grant funds. We just don't have the money to do it ourselves. So that's one of the big ones.
Hey, hold on, just Andy, you can actually go sit down, and because we got the remote clicker, and then I'll let Mr. Walters hit you. We'll do the congressional hearing style so you can be more comfortable. All right, Mr. Walters.
On the South Commercial project, I certainly take your point that we ideally would not spend all of our own funds on the project, and any grants that we can get would be greatly appreciated. If we can't get the grants, we could still do the project with our own funds, maybe by doing half at a time or whatever, right? I mean, there is some funding solution even entirely with our own funds, but it would assumedly eat into our pavement management funds. Historically, we have really not spent, to my knowledge, which is limited given some of the lack of transparency around the program and the funding. But to my knowledge, we haven't spent those pavement management funds, the 1.8 million a year, on sidewalk improvements and ramps. Most of the time because we weren't necessarily needing to. But in the Public Works Committee, we have discussed an ordinance that would create a special fund for pavement management, and it would explicitly authorize spending those funds on sidewalks as well as the pavement, and I think button up all the components necessary to self-fund this if we had to. And it sure would be great if we could consider that as part of this budget cycle. The primary purpose of that ordinance is to make sure that we are spending at least the $1.8 million on average that we have previously promised to our constituents on pavement management. The Commercial Avenue project would certainly qualify under that, and maybe we could broaden it a little bit to be not just blacktop, but also the sidewalks and the ramps and those kinds of things, not just on this project, but on all projects going forward, because streets belong to all users, not just cars. Now, I don't think everybody agrees. I was pitching that to a constituent last week who said they didn't think that was consistent with what we promised the voters, but I don't actually think it was that clear. It'd be useful to have that discussion. But the most important thing is for us to get to a place where we can track from year to year to year to year that we are spending the amount of money that we promised the voters on pavement management. And as we've said before, that doesn't have to be precisely 1.8 million a year. Maybe some years we save money, some years we spend more. But a mechanism to allow us to really track that would be very helpful. So maybe we can have more discussion about that at a future budget session. But it seems to me, again, because we mention it every single budget year or every budget season, maybe we could get that done this time.
I do have some good news. This year we did spend 1.8 million on pavement. We brought an item back to council because it came in less than what we estimated it at, so we added more while the guy was out here paving. So we hit the goal this year. I can't speak to the years before that. I wasn't here, but my intention is to execute the $1.8 million in pavement. If we want to change that to add sidewalks and curb ramps, that's definitely something we need to talk about as a group. But the thing I was talking about with the Commercial Avenue, we'll get into this too a little bit more detail, but in the CFP, we've always had money for ADA ramps and sidewalk, gaps. That's not very much money, but there is money in there year after year. And the engineering department did deliver on those in 2024 as well to make sure we spent every last dollar we could on the ADA ramps that we have budgeted, as well as the sidewalks. This is just a whole scale of the some mile long corridor that we're trying to tackle in one swoop. And then to answer your question, to split it up, we could split it up. I have the engineering design, the washed-out concurrency, all based on doing the whole project. But let's hope for the best with the grants. And if we don't get those, then we're going to need to pivot. And if council's direction is to try to do half the project, we'll approach washed-out with that strategy. So the other big takeaways, there's a couple of stormwater projects. One of them, and we'll get into this more in the stormwater section. So the cost of the stormwater projects, you'll see that's a pretty significant increase just because we haven't been doing a lot of stormwater projects. The water utility pipe replacement, there's a pipe built out of 1940s steel, a portion of it, and then 1960s asbestos cement pipe that goes from Sharps Corner to Oak Harbor's meter at Deception Pass. We are obligated per an agreement with Oak Harbor to deliver water to that meter. So the plan is, and you'll see it in here, that we intend to replace that section of the pipe that we're contractually required to replace this year. One last thing, that this is something that's confused me when I got here, is that out of these line items here in the Public Works summary, the sewage collection, stormwater drainage system, and the street maintenance, that's all one crew. We have one crew that does all those things. So if you keep, I think, yeah, Mr. Hoagland mentioned that, each person isn't like 100% water, 100%, well, we do have people 100%, but our crew is really stormwater funded, wastewater funded, as well as general fund funded. So, but we have to split it out so you guys can see. but it is just one crew. So that's it for the summary slide. You got the clicker there. And this is looking at it by fund. It's pretty self-explanatory, I feel like, but the arterial construction growth is obviously about the commercial avenue project. The stormwater drainage growth, it's not a huge growth because we weren't doing a whole lot for the previous budget. And then the water growth, again, is the investment in the pipe tow cover.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Moulton.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rayum. I need a reminder of the 23 to 25 trend column with the yellow and the blue.
Yeah.
I know it's a
Miss-
cool thing, but I need a refresher.
No, Ms. Peck, go ahead.
Of course. So that's a trend line, and what the yellow indicates is the high spend year or high planned spend year. So typically, well, in a lot of cases, you'll see that 25 might be the high year, but in this particular view, you're going to notice some fluctuation, and that just kind of shows the ebb and flow of capital projects that come in through the public works realm, where you can have, you know, heavy years of need and not so much in other years. So the high year is the one that's going to be in the bright yellow, is what that's intended to really kind of call out.
And so, thank you for that. And
Of
does
course.
that mean the bigger blue box is the second year, and the little horizontal line is the third lowest year?
Yes,
Okay.
that's exactly correct.
Okay, thanks. And just one thing, going back for a moment to the talk about pavement management. I think with the new, we've talked a little bit about WashDOT and requiring for grants that there's more planning for complete streets and multimodal transportation in order to qualify for grants. So I think that goes back to, as we do have the conversation about pavement management, that would be a good part of the conversation to have, that we could do that on sidewalks and curb cuts, because it is transportation for all. So I would like to have that conversation. And also, I agree that every budget year we do ask how much we spend on pavement management, and oftentimes it's very mysterious from year to year. And I appreciate what you've told us about this year. That's great. But I would like to know going forward, so we don't have to keep asking the question. And I think it's really important to our constituents as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to produce a map of where we paved it as well, if that's helpful.
And we do each year, I'm sorry that this has been so opaque, but we do publish a report every year on the city's Transportation Benefit District website on how much has been spent. I can tell you just quickly, so going through 2023, we spent nearly 2.5 million. 22 was 520,000. 21 was 2.1. If you sum the years from 23 back to 2019, we've averaged about 1.6 million, slightly over 1.6 million over those years. I believe 2019 was the first year that we had the tax in place, if I remember correctly. But yeah, that that information is on the TBD website, and we do include kind of a brief description of the areas that were overlaid those years as well. So try to be more diligent about bringing that to council, so you have that in your hands when that report gets produced.
I think it's important to highlight for the public the flexibility of the Public Works Department. When the bids actually came in lower, the way that you all flexed to make it happen, to be able to overlay more roads is really impressive. So I appreciate that flexibility. And I think council does as well, because we hear it from council every year, you know, that we need to spend that money that we said what we were going to spend it on. So, sorry.
Yes, I've clearly received that message over the last year.
Yes.
I hear you loud and clear. I want to deliver $1.8 million in paving every year.
And you did. I mean, that's kind of my point, is you understand it. And so.
Kind of one last high-level thing before we get into each of the different divisions of the department is that we did not ask for new FTEs. We did repurpose a couple of them, but we did not ask for any additional FTEs, mainly because of the kind of forecast for the revenues. You know, where it's just not a good year to ask for new things. So, all right, moving on. You got the clicker for me there?
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
Thank you for bringing that up. That is one of my areas of concern. I assume it's not even worth asking the question, do you think you can work within the FTEs that you have available already? Because you'll say yes. But it is my concern that, you know, we are doing a lot of projects, including a pretty significant one right over here, and the amount of project management staff seems to me to be a little bit of a mismatch with the amount of projects that we're doing. I would certainly be supportive of adding FTEs where necessary, maybe city engineer who specializes in traffic, something in that realm, you know, whatever your judgment is, but certainly aware that we've got constrained budgets, but we also have a lot of projects that we need to do, so I don't want us to make missteps because we don't have sufficient capacity, especially in the area of project management.
Kind of specific to that division, which that's not the administration, that'll be the next one, so I'll cover that in there a little bit. I should probably just address it now. It's hard to get an engineer to come here. That's the pay scale isn't great. We have found it useful to have consultants on call, and the breadth and depth of those consulting firms are helpful because we can get to the expert. Like, I need somebody that knows pump stations, sewer pump stations. We don't have that in-house, but they do. You'll see that in the administration line item. So we're on the administration slide here. The consultant services, back in 23, we were at 1.1 million. This year we dropped down to 320,000, and you can see that we're trailing about 200% of that. So we are asking for that amount of money to make sure we do have enough engineering support to deliver the capital program. We had a lot of turnover in the engineering division this year. We have great new people that most of them were promoted into the positions. They are training. We're getting there. I think we're coming back up at this point with our staffing capacity and capabilities. So I think next year you're going to see a lot of return on investment on the group that we've kind of been building this year. Would I love another engineer? You bet. I have one engineer on staff, but we do have two on-call engineering firms, one for transportation and stormwater, and then the other one's for water and sewer. So far, that's worked out pretty good. I went to that right when I got here. I had no engineers, so I immediately needed engineers to be on as the representative for the city as the city engineer. We have since hired one, but we still have them there to supplement our one engineer.
And historically, the city has had 2 engineers on staff, which is, you know, related to my concern. But certainly, I also take your point that you can fill in, but you are filling in with professional service dollars. So ultimately, I still see that we're going to need to make some additional enhancements in staffing.
Yeah, I think that's another part of why the professional services for hiring engineers is. I've noticed since I got here, we had people making engineering decisions that weren't engineers. I'm not an engineer, but I've been working in this field long enough to know when you trigger an engineer. It's just like, you know, when you need a lawyer kind of thing. You know it when you know it, when you've seen this line of work long enough. And so there's been a lot more engineering involved this year than I would say in the past. I think at one time they had 3 FTEs that were all licensed engineers, and now we're down to 1.
It was just two, and then it was 0 for at least a year where we had contract, everything was contract.
Okay. So that kind of wraps up the administration. We're down 5%. I guess the other thing to point out is supplies. We blew our supplies budget, but this budget line item for supplies we've been using for basically 3rd floor, and so it's just the cost of. It's not a huge amount of money, but it's just something I want to point out that we overshot it. And we're trying to correct that with this budget cycle. All right, so we're going to move on to the next slide unless there's more questions about admin. Engineering. Kind of really the biggest increase there is the cost of the professional services has gone up just a little bit. And here it's for GIS and cartograph. It's not for engineering, like hiring a consultant engineer. That we kept that in the administration side. It was spread across both, so I tried to organize it a little better so we knew which it's just in one spot. That's really the only big change here for the engineering division for the year. Why is it half a page? There's
Yes.
There we go. That's better. Okay, so facilities. A couple of things I've heard from council pretty loud and clear too. There were kind of big lumps of money in facilities, and that was used for projects as they came up, and there wasn't really specificity about what it was we were trying to do. So I tried to correct that. You'll see that in the capital facilities plan. You'll see very specific, like we're going to do the windows on this building, or the roof on this building, or the HVAC system on this other building, instead of it being like, trust us, we know what we're doing with 750,000. We'll just go do it. We do have some funds in here. The big one to point out is probably the, where is it? Where we have, we need to hire people to come like do the HVAC system or electrical, that type of thing. And so there is a big chunk of funds that are still there, but those are actually, we do have, like, we can tell you exactly the contracts and how much those just cost every year to run 7 large municipal buildings, so. Outside of that, it's all pretty straightforward. Supplies is up just a tiny bit, but that's not very much money. Do you have any questions about facilities? All right, moving on to sanitation. Just because sanitation could be confusing, this is about us hauling garbage and doing recycling. So, because sanitation could mean, you know, some people might think wastewater, but so it is the sanitation. Pretty benign here. The one thing you're probably wondering is that we had a huge rate increase from Skagit County for our tipping fee for dumping. We anticipated that in the 2024 budget. That's why it's flat for 2025. It just took them longer than we anticipated. Originally, they were like, no, we're going to do this in February. But it took until, you know, much later than that for the new tipping fees to come into effect in 2024. So we're not thinking we need any more than we budgeted last year. And should be good to go with our tipping fee. Okay. And then the taxes, those are utility taxes that the sanitation fund is paying back to the general fund. It's its own separate utility, just like water, sewer, and storm.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
This is the fund that had been highlighted by the auditor as one that is getting a little short on cash. And we have sanitation contracts that are going to be ending over the next several years. Is there anything that we need to be doing to prepare for those eventualities?
I believe you guys changed the rate structure, or you increased the rates because of the tipping fee cost.
We did that, yeah.
And we think that's okay. Let's just kind of see how it goes. This year, we're tracking it. I don't think there's more we need to do at the moment. You know, once we are having to open up the contract, so Waste Management has a contract for our recycling and yard waste for our residential, commercial people are on their own. But our contract is for residential, residential recycling and yard waste. So that we did our option to extend it just 1 year. I've asked Waste Management to give us their best offer to extend it an additional year, just to kind of see what they are willing to do. That might be a good indicator whether we need to go for a full-blown, you know, go out to bid, basically, to see if there's another hauler in the area that was interested. Then we actually do have interest in our contract for the residential recycling and yard waste. I've been contacted by them. So I know there's more than just Waste Management out there, but we did ask Waste Management to come and provide us with 1 year additional extension. We'll need that to get another hauler on board. You need to give them a year's notice so they can buy the trucks, up their staff, and all that type of thing. So it's not a, you know, like, oh, we'll change our mind in 3 months and we're going to go use a different company. You have to.
So I was thinking about that, and it seems to me when we go out to buy a garbage truck, you know, it's like, oh, well, you need to buy it 5 years ahead of time, or, you know, it's just an insane lead time on purchase of trucks for us. What about for other private haulers? I mean, is there a real likelihood that a private hauler who might want to compete for our business could acquire more trucks sufficient to service Anacortes even within a year, with a year lead time? Or are we kind of creating a situation where only the biggest player in the sandbox is really even able to bid? Because last time around, we didn't get any other bids.
Yeah, we'll probably look at that when so we have a lot of time. So our current contract, I don't remember when it is, but it's not even next year, but then we extended it an additional year. So we're 2 years out, let's say right now. And then Waste Management, we asked them to give us what they would, because they can negotiate the contract for that additional year, or we can do it for even more years if we wanted. But that opens the contract, so they get to say, like, well, actually, no, it's going to cost this much instead of what you're paying now for your services. So I think the lead time on a garbage truck is somewhere around 1.5 years. I've got 2 years. We're at 2 years at the moment. I would imagine their cash is the same as ours. So once we put our money down, it gets in the conveyor belt to build just the same. But they do have, a lot of companies are big companies. They might have extra trucks already type of thing, or they lose a contract somewhere else and they want to come here. They already have their trucks and their staff to do it. So that's all kind of, let's just wait and see. Let's work out if Waste Management comes back with a pretty attractive, I have a consultant on board, he's the regional expert on these, and so if they come back and it's a pretty reasonable rate that they want to do for the 1 year extension, we can then discuss it as a community whether we want to make it longer than that or not. But
yeah, and maybe we can track that in the Public Works Committee and see if we want to do something a little more.
Okay, any other questions on sanitation? Good.
Emily?
Mr. Young.
It'd be a short comment. I just felt I would be remiss if I didn't say that, what I really appreciate is that of us looking at those costs and the reality of, price points. I don't like feeling held hostage by any entity that sort of can fluctuate their rates just because they want to. And so I just think it's in our interest to begin a look now. If we, I think my mother used to always tell me it's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. So, for me, it's just satisfying the curiosity of what else may be out there, so it gives us leverage in our conversations rather than just starting at that point. So I've never really been a fan of how they've done it, so I wanted to sort of put that on the record as well.
Yeah, as soon as I'm done with the master plans for all the different utilities and the transportation system, we'll have bandwidth that we can start working on this. Okay, sewage collection. So there is a sewage treatment plant, section 2. So this is just the collection side, and it does not include the lift stations. It's basically a very boring change from last year. Just salaries and wages went up. Any other questions? Good. Okay, sewer treatment. So sewer treatment, there's again, not a lot going on there. I guess the big thing to talk about here is the wastewater treatment plant. So we're building that outfall. They're way ahead of schedule. They have flown through the project, which has been great, and they're doing a great job. We actually get compliments from the community about their traffic control, which is, you don't get that very often. So they're doing a great job. We've had very little delays, and they did it faster than we thought they could. So it's going really well. We're hoping it'll be done by the end of this year. So that's why you see this big budget drop. There's another big component to the budget drop, and I would be remiss if I didn't say that last year I showed up for this process and I said, you guys, we really need to put some money in the wastewater treatment plant. I still feel that way. Our treatment plant is getting old. It's from the 90s, which is making me feel old to say that's old, but it's getting old. But there's a lot of different parts about your wastewater treatment plant. We have an incinerator, which is very unique in the state of Washington. It seems to be unique across the nation. If we work on that incinerator by itself, the incinerator is an incinerator, so it wears out over time, and it's getting to the end. And you can't put more than 50% of its value back into it without triggering a bunch of stuff with the US EPA. So we really need to think about how we manage the wastewater treatment plant, and if we change how we deal with the solids. I know it's not a very beautiful conversation, but how we manage the solids and what we need to do for the water treatment. We have a nutrient requirement that's new to wastewater treatment plants in Western Washington. We really need to take a really hard look at the wastewater treatment plant and make sure that there's a whole process involved about like, well, what do we want our wastewater treatment plant to be? And it sounds awful, but it's actually, when you start talking with people about it, there's things that we need to decide. Like, do we want to be, is our target just to have the most cleanest water leaving the plant? Do we care about the carbon footprint of managing the solids? Like, there's just lots of questions that we kind of need to work through to know what to do next. And so this coming year, and that with we're doing a general sewer plan with that, and then doing this effort to the coming year to say, like, what is it that we want to do with the wastewater treatment plant? Then we're going to have a pretty good idea of the next decade, basically, of investment into that wastewater treatment plant to get us going for an additional 50 years or so.
Miller?
Mr. Walters.
So are you saying that you have kind of pared back the capital projects until we have that conversation? Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, it was, my eyes were wide open by our wastewater manager that we did have a list of things there, and they were all good things. Those things are totally wearing out. But at the same time, it's like, well, let's not just go. I've seen a new HVAC system put on a building that we knocked down 3 months later type of thing. So I want to avoid that for us here in the city of Anacortes. So the same with your wastewater treatment plant. I'd hate to see us put all this effort into it, and then the EPA says, shut it down. Your incinerator is no longer permittable.
And the HVAC was a hypothetical, not a real project, right?
No, that really happened at a former city I was at.
But have we evaluated and maybe this isn't even an option, but have we evaluated the option of hauling our solids instead of incinerating them?
Yep, that's an option, yep.
Have we already, we've had a lot of difficulty having this conversation starting 4+ years ago. But have we evaluated that option?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, not to the level we need to. We really need to discuss, like, what is it that's important to us?
Mm-hmm. Okay, all right, so that's coming.
Yes.
Okay, and then sewage collection versus sewage treatment. Is sewage collection pumps and pipes, and sewage treatment the plant?
It's just the pipes, yeah.
Just the pipes.
Actual pumps that are throughout, we have 22 lift stations throughout the city. Those are actually kind of considered part of the wastewater treatment plant. Don't know why, but that's just that's how we budget it.
Okay.
All right, we're good there on treatment. PFP. So storm drainage, like I said earlier, we're doing a utility plan for the stormwater utility, and we're going to have an update current model, which will predict flooding, which I'm worried, but I hope it's going to be very informative and something that we can deal with managing going forward. A couple of things came to light this year, one of them being Fidalgo Bay Road floods every winter. We've been putting up slow signs on each side of the flooding, and by the way, it's not just part of a lane, it's the entire reach of the road up to the curb, so that's like 4-inch deep flooding. So you can only imagine if you're flying down that thing in the dark and you come up on that, there could be pretty dire consequences. So we have switched to doing road closed signs. We're not doing a hard closure where you guard it off. You would do that if there was a river involved and their car would float away kind of thing. But we do the road closed signs right now. We have worked with WDFW. We have to get an HPA, it's called HPA permit from them, as well as it's in our shoreline jurisdiction. So we need to go through a whole process of permitting to do a project to make sure that road drains. That'll be happening. We were hoping to actually start building on that project this year, but due to permitting, it's going to take a bit of time. It has to go to the Planning Commission for a decision, that type of thing. So that's one of the projects. The other one, we went out and cleaned out a ditch. There's no stream involved here, but it's the ditch on the north side of the MJB property. And we were on MJB's, it's not funny, so sorry for laughing. We were on MJB's property to clean it out, and they called us and they said, hey, could you ask before you go on our property to clean your ditch? And I was like, I had no idea that that's your property. we thought we were in the easement, so we needed to pipe that ditch before MJB builds. Because the other side of it is wrought iron fence that abuts the port property as well as the school district property. So once, if MJB goes to redevelop right there, we would have no access to that ditch, and that would be a pretty big problem. So we want to get that done this year, as well as there's the pipe for some reason ends right next to the Anacortes School District building there. Oddly way back from the water, so we do want to extend that out, but that also is an opportunity for the Promenade MJB property to actually build that thing instead of having a bridge. So again, there's no creek involved, it's just the thing needs to be piped so that it can be maintained going forward.
Miller?
Mr. Young.
Just a quick question, Mr. Rayum. In realizing that there's additional work that we're trying to get done that you was just speaking about for the MJB property, have we taken a hard look to see if there's any other thing that we may need to do over there?
So
I guess, you know, right now we still have, I would assume that we would be able to, you know, do whatever additional work we may need to at a later time, but it seems like that might be a bit more contentious if they've already started developing and then looking at what other impacts may be for us as a city and you know, storm drainage. How do we, I guess what I'm asking is that, have we taken a hard look at their whole property such that, you know, we can confidently go forward to say, you know, another instance like needing to do some additional work has already been sort of pre-thought, and we have baked that into our conversations with them and also into our budgets. Am I making sense to you what I'm looking?
Yeah.
Okay.
So for the MJB property, just in total, their water system has checked out, their sewer system has checked out, but they've already built those. And so we actually worked with them and did a concurrency modeling to make sure that they had properly installed the right pipes, and we think they're good as long as they don't overbuild. As long as they don't build more than they already estimated they're going to build, they should be fine. The wastewater system is completely owned by them at this point. We do have some odds and ends, like we need it cambered, for example, just to make sure like if the pipes are broke, because there is a pretty big trunk line that goes through their property, but frankly, it's on them to fix it at this point. So we are working with them, but so far everything's really checked out with their system. The pipe we're talking about isn't even on their property, but we've been using their property to access it. So.
You've addressed my issue, because again, I was just sort of not sure, you know, that whether it would lead to another lengthy discussion with them at some future point, and it would affect how we provide service here at the city. So yes, thank you.
I think it's important for council to know that that pipe project is really, it will help move forward our relationship with MJB. They weren't that mad about the trespassing, but we've identified that area as a challenge from the ESD property and bridging that with the promenade. So being able to do this project, I think will help take another step forward.
Yeah, just to clarify, they weren't mad. They're kind of giving us a hard
they
time.
were just giving me a little bit of a hard time.
Yeah. It was totally fair though. I mean, we took backhoes down their property, and that's not a gentle thing to have happen on your property. So,
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
So I didn't quite follow your description there. How does hard piping what is now a ditch solve our access problem?
So to clean a ditch, you have to literally drive down the side of the ditch and scoop it out.
Mm-hmm.
Where if it's a pipe, I can send, it's called a jetter, that goes down through a manhole and goes all the way down the length of the thing and pulls the debris back.
Do we already then have an easement or otherwise access to the area that the pipe sits under?
We do, yeah, but the access isn't great. If we lose the access from the MGB property side, we're gonna have to take down, you'll see it if you drive by, the iron gates are built on that other side. It's not one of those things you can just kind of reach over and try to work on the storm system. It's pretty blocked off. Okay, we're good. We're good. We're flying. We're doing good. Storm. There's the CFP. Street maintenance. One of the things that I don't think it's really doesn't really show up here. It's in the CFP to buy a new paint striping equipment, but we noticed as well as everybody else that the lines weren't exactly straight this year. So we are working actually in the meantime with Mount Vernon has, it's called long lining in the industry, where you have these very specific type of equipment. When you're going to paint a long line, you don't just use it with some poor guy trying to make it straight. It keeps the line straight. It's an expensive piece of equipment, but we're going to work with Mount Vernon and see how that goes for us next year. They have the equipment there, and they're willing to come out on a weekend. They think it'll just take a day or two to do all of our long lines in the city. We're still working out the cost, but it's not going to cost a lot. So it'll be interesting to see how that works, and hopefully it'll look better next year. Sorry about the wiggly lines. We did have new crew members and kind of antiquated equipment that we were trying to use. So. Outside of that, there's not a whole lot. The other improvements obviously is going up, and that is just the size and the cost of the commercial avenue focus. All right. Any?
Mr. Walters.
In the transportation CFP, we've got this project, the Marina connection, which I think is the 9th Street connection. Is that
yep.
right? Okay, so it's programmed for $500,000 in 2026, no money in 2025. There's downtown streetscape for 2024 for $35,000, which I don't think we're spending that money, right? And then for next year, $80,000 for downtown streetscape. And then we still have, for downtown streetscape, $1 million in each of 2026 and 2028. When we programmed this project last year, I thought most of us said maybe we shouldn't program $1 million for those 2 outlying years because we don't really know what we're doing with streetscape. And so we're not really saving the money for those projects. And we don't need to because we don't know what we're doing for those projects yet. It seems to me that some of this should get cleaned up and that there should be some money for the marina connection for planning in 2025. I mean, I don't know what we're planning for 2026. Maybe you do, and maybe we don't need money for planning, but it seems to me that we would budget some money for planning to design that connection. And I assume it's going to be consistent with what the port is planning for the 9th R curve, but you know, maybe it could be more or less, or I don't know. Can you talk about those projects?
Sure. So the 9th connection, you nailed it on the head. It's in design.
It's
the port's design. I mean, they're designing.
So we anticipate just using their design.
Yep.
Period. Okay.
Now, 500,000 is arguably not enough to build that one block of frontage improvements on both sides of the road, but we won't know that until we get a little further down the design, because we don't want to have our design be for that one block different than what the port did all the way up to there from the beach or from Cap Santa. So streetscapes.
Well, no. Okay, so what I heard there is it's going to be the port's design, but we haven't finished our design yet for that one. But do we not need? You know, we just had this conversation about the event center, and you know, whether the event center happens or not, we want the connection between Commercial Avenue and the 9th R curve, and you know, the marina. I mean, we've been talking about that for 12 plus years. So don't we need a little bit of money to get that done concomitant with their work on 9th and R?
They've been willing to develop to design that last block for us to pay for. They're planning on designing and paying for the rest of it.
Oh, they are going to design our block for them. Okay.
And we'll
can you give us a little preview of what that is? I mean, why is 500 too much? I mean, I don't even know what is being planned there.
Just from doing the frontage improvements along Commercial, it's 500,000 doesn't go a long ways for ramps and sidewalks, and if we're going to replace everything.
Okay, just in that one block between Commercial and Q on 9th.
Yeah.
Okay. And then downtown streetscape?
Downtown streetscapes. So I met with Downtown Anacortes Alliance shortly after the budget, and I was like, I've got so many plans going right now, I don't know if we can get to this. And they were cordial enough to say, okay, let's do it next year. And so we're doing it in 2025. We'll have time to do it. The staff will have time to do it. 80,000 is just we thought it would cost more. Basically trying to figure out kind of what things they want to analyze and look at for the streetscapes is just on commercial, by the way, in the old part of town, or from north of 11th or so. So we're working on a kind of a conceptual plan, conceptual project with the $80,000 for streetscapes. Now, the latter years of $1 million a year, I would say that was basically a guess. If we want that not in there, that's totally up to you guys. We assume that there'll probably be projects coming out of the design with the downtown Anacortes Alliance. Sorry, not design, conceptual design that we work on with the downtown Anacortes Alliance, that there'll be something that we'll probably want to move on. And so that's why there's latter years of funding in each year to accommodate that. We could wipe it all out and then add it back next year once we have a better idea what it is that comes out of the conceptual project, and totally fine.
And last year, I thought as well, we programmed money for a parking plan for downtown because people complain about parking. Now, not everybody complains about parking, and the DAA has done some work on parking, but assume arguendo that we need more parking downtown. We had talked in previous years about making more diagonal parking on existing streets, and just speaking for myself, I kind of wanted to get to the end of that discussion. Like, are we actually going to do it, or are we just throwing around diagrams in meetings? And so we had a project for downtown parking, and I don't see it here now. Have we affirmatively decided to nix that?
That's never hit my radar. That might be a different department.
Maybe it was in a different department. Maybe it was in planning. I don't know where it would show up in the CFP.
That's usually a planning exercise in my past experiences.
But it touches right away.
Oh yeah.
Were you willing to let go of the downtown streets and let the planning department figure them out?
Just to tell me if I need more parking or not. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Coleman.
I don't have my information with me, but I believe I have 10,000 in one of my budgets for one of my line items for a downtown parking study. So that's a small study. It's not a big one.
And so it could be, especially when we only see line items for plans, we don't really know what we're talking about. I mean, I had envisioned when we were talking about a downtown parking plan, maybe not a study, but a plan, that we were going to be drawing lines on pavement to add diagonal parking. Mr. Miesmer had done that work a number of years ago, or he had had someone do it, and I don't think it was properly vetted such that you could make a decision to move forward with it, but it showed lots of additional spaces with just paint and potentially making some streets one way or another. If we wanted to add parking downtown, that would seem to me to be the cheapest way to do it, and I was just hoping to get to a resolution.
Well, I don't know how long ago it happened, but we've painted those lines on 6th Street within the last few months to add those diagonal lines based on that plan.
And John is correct. There is $10,000 in his operational budget, so you won't see it in the CFP. And we could potentially, consider expanding it based on how that project moves along. But that's where that went.
Plans go in the operational budget, not the CFP, right? I think that's what we last year hashed out.
We've had that debate before.
Yeah, $10,000 doesn't rise to the level of a CFP project, right? So
correct.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Fantini.
I just had a question as I was looking at this, and I'm sure there's a good reason for it. But in 2025, like, we have that 1.8 million for annual pavement maintenance in every single year except 2025. And I also noticed that which I think is a very valuable line item, the sidewalk and trip hazards repairs. That's also in every year, but not in 2025. Is there a reason for that, or there is, isn't there?
Commercial Avenue.
Commercial Avenue. Okay, that's what I assumed, but I just
That's why we're all in on Commercial Avenue. If we can get the grant funds to match us, we're...
Well, that would certainly fix plenty of trip hazards. Yeah.
Okay. Doing good. We're going to move on to vehicles and equipment. Kind of a big The big one I saw there was the insurance premiums going way up. I don't know if you've noticed that on your homeowner's insurance, but same thing. Outside of that, everything's pretty status quo. Questions?
Mayor Miller?
Mr. McDougall?
Yeah, I noticed the insurance item as well, and it looks like it kind of like did an oscillation where 23 actuals was closer to what the 25 budget. So it like did a big drop and then comes back up. Are we on 2-year policies?
Do you have us on that? And this is Shu.
Ms. Shu could probably help out as our insurance negotiator.
We are not on, we're on annual policies for insurance, and we're evaluating options for next year.
So, Mayor Miller,
Yeah.
if I may, I noticed, some of you council members may have noticed this as well in going through the different departmental budgets. The insurance numbers in a number of these departments were a little bit wonky. And there were a couple of reasons for that. I did notice we had a couple departments where that number just didn't get put in correctly at all, and I think that's the case here. Another part of that, in the 25 budget, we did take, we reevaluated the claims history for our liability insurance, so that shifted dramatically among some of the departments. So there were a couple of issues at play there. So 24 is some of those numbers you need to take with a grain of salt.
Thank you. That makes sense.
Good to move on. I think we're getting close to the end here.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Walters?
Yeah, you've got 50,000 ops building expansion and the highlighted number 2 there. What can you do for 50,000? I guess is my first question. And number 2, how come that doesn't show up in the facilities CFP list?
I'm gonna have to probably defer to the operations manager on that one. I hope he's ready. There we go. Will Ludeman.
Good evening. That was put in there before while we still had plans to do our optimization study for ops that did not go through. So that's what that money was allotted for implementing anything that came out of that plan. So there's no current plans for that money that I know of.
So is that 50K that we could strike then? Is that?
I'll have to look back at my notes, but I'm pretty sure most of that would be.
Okay. I think we can just strike that, if that's all right with council. Okay, moving on to water maintenance. We also have a water plant, but let's start with water maintenance. I didn't have anything really to point out to you other than obviously it's going to go up a bit because we're going to replace a lot of 10-inch pipe to Oak Harbor. Questions on that one? Good. Okay. Water treatment plant. And I think this is the last one. Yes. The water treatment plant, the only kind of exciting thing I wanted to point out to you is under inventory and resale, the cost of chemicals to treat the water have gone up. So that's why you see the increase there. Other than that, there's just kind of little things that have increased a little bit. But again, the other improvements, the 185% increases, we're going to do a pretty big water pipe project.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. McDougall?
This is just a curiosity more than anything. The term resale within inventory and resale, why is that term used?
Because it's in the water that we resell. I'm leaning on the finance director on that one. I don't know. That's a good question. I asked the same thing. What is that? And we had to look it up on the details to find out it was the chemicals.
Okay.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Walters?
Back on the facilities CFP projects, we've got City Hall seagull mitigation for $30,000 for 2025, and a couple of us have had the discussion about rather than adding more equipment to the roof of City Hall, what if we do something else, a different mitigation strategy, bring in a falconer or whatever else we can do, but that is apparently about an equivalent cost, maybe slightly more, and could benefit all of downtown versus shifting the seagulls to the next building over. Have you evaluated such an option, and is that something we could reasonably do?
So I did start digging. I thought that was a fascinating idea. One of the problems with it is the falcons do kill the seagulls, so there's that fallout that I just kind of want to get that on the table. That
Our city bird.
Falcons are gentle about this. And then there's other options too to mitigate seagulls that we've learned about since we first put this bid together from the one contractor we did talk to that's an expert about getting birds off of your roof. So it's a work in progress. I think we need to come back. I'd like to come back and talk with you about the alternatives and what we pick. I thought the falconing thing was a great idea, but again, it's a little violent. There could be some.
Yeah, I would be interested in fully understanding, the dynamics of that, but also might be okay with that in some circumstances. And in the alternative, if we do just shift seagulls to other people's buildings, that is going to have some problems. So I do also really like the idea of somehow of any approach that could solve the problem for the entire downtown, because I think that the seagull issue has potential to be a significant negative for our citizens, for tourists. I mean, I've sat right next to a person who got seagulled really badly right in front of Pelican Books, to the point where I won't sit there anymore. I saw an explosion of seagull in the air. It looked like a fireworks display. I swerved my vehicle to avoid it. If there's some simple solution to this, I would really like to try to achieve it if we can.
So they are a protected bird. There's from 1892.
Yeah, I don't advocate
right,
doing anything
one-
illegal.
Okay, one at a time.
But yeah, so maybe if we could just get more briefing on that before implementing it, maybe we could tweak the title of the project to seagull mitigation. Generally, I don't know, just leave the door open.
I plan to bring options.
Yeah.
There's more, and so I just want to kind of vet them out first.
Did somebody else want to speak? Anybody? Okay.
That's the end. Thank you.
Ms. Cleveland McGrath.
Hey, so I just wanted to go back to the wastewater system. And I understand we're doing a master plan for the update. And also, is that correct?
We're doing a general sewer plan, so that's your entire system.
But so I guess my question is this: when we going back to delaying or deferring some of the projects for the wastewater treatment plant, I just want to make sure that we're not. I understand the idea of like the HVAC system. That's like something that's pretty straightforward to be replaced. But I'm looking at, for example, on page 93, the recoat clarifiers steelworks. So these are 20-year-old pieces of equipment that currently has corrosion. Does it make sense to delay it 2 more years, or is this something that is going to be pertinent for the function of our system, and by delaying 2 years, are we going to see too much corrosion happen? I understand the idea of delaying certain projects because we could have a better master plan, and as we all know, regulations constantly changing and becoming more strict. So the incinerator issue, yeah, we may not be able to do that, but at the same time, some of those key systems, I have concern that if we're going to delay a year, 2 or 3 years, the plan isn't going to be ready to execute and completely replace within 3 years. So I just want to confirm that there are some of those issues that we need to keep maintenance going in a timely manner so that our wastewater treatment plant continues to function smoothly. We're not delaying.
Yeah, it's a no-fail operation.
Right. So that's kind of, some of these, when I'm skimming through, I just want to get a confirmation from both of you guys that like, yes, we're not taking a risk by putting ourselves in like a crisis situation because we have not either reordered these obscure pieces of equipment from the Midwest or done the major work that
He's
needs
ready.
to get done.
He's ready, sorry.
What?
He's ready to come chat if you want.
Yeah, I just, it seems really important, and I just want to make sure we're not kind of pushing it down the road.
All of us remember Mr. Walker, who were on council about 3 or 4 years ago, where Mr. Raham's predecessor was telling us about the 6 different versions of a brand new wastewater treatment plant that we had to build based on regulations. So that's that. I think some of that's where that's coming, Ms. Cleveland
Well,
McGrath.
no,
Yeah,
it's
right.
not.
Oh,
Actually,
sorry.
it's coming from the fact that we have a very high-functioning older system, and I think that our people are trained in it and it works well, and I don't want to not continue to maintain it because we're waiting on a plan that might come out in the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, sorry.
And that seems like it's been stressed to me that we want to keep the equipment we have functioning in an optimum condition.
We share your concerns as well, and the projects that we have moved out of this next year, we've only moved a little ways down the road. So the example of the clarifier steelworks, they're 32 years old, and so putting that off just another year is something that we feel is feasible at this point. So, and Mayor, your comment about the larger discussion about the changing the process at large and changing out the incinerator, that's something that we're working on reigniting at this point.
Thank you.
We will
Yep.
be back in front of you shortly, I promise.
We know it's a no-fail operation and appreciate the work that happens there every day.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Walters.
Well, sometimes I think we're reluctant to pull at the threads of this because sometimes it just makes a bigger hole. The clarifier steelworks are listed here in the wastewater CFP for 2024, but then they're not programmed to be moved to 25 or 26 or the other out years. Should they be? I don't see them on this version of the sheet.
Maybe in the detailed.
Maybe there's not a sync up with the summary sheet and the individual sheets?
Possibly.
Okay. Yeah, we don't, the sheet that I'm looking at, which is page 13 in this presentation that's on the screen, doesn't have those projects in the out years. It has them in 20, or specifically Recoat Clarifier Steelworks, as an example, is listed in 2024 and then not in the later years.
The paperwork that I'm looking at has it listed in 2026.
Okay, so
and
maybe
the moral
that's
of the
just a
story is that
sync.
they are not forgotten. They are just they're pending the results of this GSP.
Okay. At what point will we get the document that is actually proposed to be adopted?
The general sewer plan is slated to be delivered by the
Oh,
end of this year.
not that master plan. I mean the CFP document and the budget document.
So still pulling together some of those final files. I'm hoping to have that pulled together. Certainly by the time it comes to council for the public hearing for the budget. But I in fact just sent an email to myself a little bit ago to reinvigorate some of those boilerplate files and start compiling some of that stuff. So I guess that's the short answer. By the time we have the public hearing, we should have that full draft budget book pulled together.
And what date is that?
I was trying to remember as well. In fact, my computer locked up as I was trying to pull up that file. So
You can email.
We're going to make it 2 years in a row having the budget book
Mayor Miller.
for council. Ms. Hubick.
Public hearing on the budget is Tuesday, November 12th.
All right, thank you.
Miller?
Mr. Walters.
Well, that is next week, so that's just like a couple days from now.
Oh, yeah.
So we anticipate having all that in just.
might have to republish on Tuesday.
Okay, council, any other questions you have since we got the whole Public Works team here? Okay, again, it's not, obviously not closed, and continue to ask those questions and help us make sure we get it right. All right, no further business scheduled before the council. I'll adjourn tonight's meeting. Thank you.